Hello, FPL managers. Welcome to the FPL Optimized podcast. This is episode number 56, in which we will review Game Week 4 and we will also cover some questions we received. We won't cover all the Game Week 5 data yet, as we're in an international break now, so we'll save some of the content for next week's podcast to look at all the latest data. But that won't make today's episode less interesting as we received some interesting questions from several listeners. Thanks for that. I am Bas, the casual manager, and my co host is Sertalp, the data scientist. This is the podcast in which we combine analytics with the good old eye test. Data or grass, or data and grass? That's the question. Sertalp, let's quickly look at game week 4. How did it go for you?
Like every game week, the same story. But so game week 4 is another terrible game week for me. 6.5 million game week rank, and my
Okay.
overall rank is down to 3.2 million. I mean,
Yeah.
ranks hardly matter, of course, especially at this point. Like the point difference is much more important. But it is annoying to have a relatively good game week and then immediately have a terrible game week. So I'm a little
Yeah.
bit upset as usual.
Yeah.
68 points didn't feel like a terrible game week when I was
Mhm.
having it, but I think Haaland's points inflated everyone's points. So if
Right.
some people didn't have Haaland in their team, their ranks probably got destroyed.
Yeah.
But yeah, regarding my team, again, my differential players blanked, and like Pickford, Henry, Chilwell, Richarlison, Jackson, they all got 1 point.
Yeah.
Um, it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just glad I didn't try to be smart with the captaincy as I usually do. That's the only good
Yeah,
thing
indeed.
about this game week. How was
I was
yours?
happy about that as well. Yeah, that would have been terrible if you didn't captain Haaland and then you see him scoring a hat trick.
Yeah,
We still know the feeling from last
flashbacks
year,
from the
the
last year.
flashbacks. So I'm glad I avoided it. But well, maybe some people were Captain Son or maybe Ferguson as well. There were three hat tricks on Saturday. That was also quite unusual.
Yeah, and we
Um,
had Son in our optimal wildcard team, if I
right.
remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And I remember that I said that that was a bit strange. But of
Yes, you
course, I
did.
think, we looked at the previous three game weeks, and now in game week 4, he was playing in the number 9 spot. And we see a lot of people talking about that now. Because if Son keeps that spot, of course, yeah, he could be a target to bring in,
Hmm.
especially as Spurs have a good fixture. I think it's against Sheffield in game week 5. So I think, yeah, he already increased in price, and
Yeah.
probably even more people will bring him in during the international break. I
Yeah.
think he will be
So
popular. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, but yeah, you had 68 points. I had 69, so that's just 1 point more, but that's enough.
Oh,
It
okay.
makes the score 3-1 in our little head-to-head competition. So I'll take it.
I'm just letting
um,
you get, ahead a little bit so that, you know,
oh,
it
right.
will be more
Make it
fun when I
make it
beat
more
you.
interesting for yourself. I get it. All right. Okay. Let's see. But no, to your point, that was a bit strange because also I had the feeling that I was having an okay week, but well, in the end, with 69, it's below average. The average was 72, so I also lost some rank. I also saw that in our mini leagues. But yeah, uh, I think also quite many players were returning points. So even in my case, when I saw like Mitoma and Saka and Martinelli, getting assists, I was quite happy. They scored points, but then there were other players like Madison, like a few others like Son, who even scored more points. So I think that's a little bit the thing.
Hmm.
We also mentioned it last week. There are so many good options, but yeah, you want to be, of course, on the ones scoring the most points, which isn't that easy. Well, my defense was a disaster, but I think that was the case for many people. Chelsea unfortunately conceded against Forest. They even lost against Forest, which I think many people were not expecting. But as also mentioned in previous podcasts, I think Forest is not the Forest from last season. They've been playing quite well so far, and they're quite difficult to beat. So I think that's something we should keep in mind also for
Hmm.
future fixtures. And then Brighton, that was painful, of course, still conceding in the 93rd minute, if I'm not mistaken. So that was, losing the clean sheet for Estupinen. Yeah, and in midfield, I did hold on in the end to guys like Mitoma, Rashford, Martinelli. I didn't sell them, so in a way, I'm happy because I go into the international break with two free transfers,
Mm-hmm.
and also, yeah, all three of them return points. So it's not too bad. It's just that I, of course, missed some of the higher scores again, especially on Spurs players, who I don't own at the moment,
Yeah.
especially Madison and Son. So that's something I need to focus on. And in front, yeah, as we just said, it showed again why we shouldn't bet against Haaland, because the guy can score hat tricks in any week. You never know which one, but it can happen. And Jackson was unlucky. I think a lot of people have talked about that as well. The opportunity that he missed. Well, you can call it unlucky, or you can also maybe say it's lacking some skill. But I'll still give him the benefit
The
of the
big
doubt.
debate. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
But yeah, I should mention that as a Liverpool fan, I'm kind of enjoying Chelsea's misfortune a little bit because of the transfer season. So I
Yeah.
mean, FPL
Okay.
wise, it's
True.
terrible for me, but like, I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I mean,
Yeah, and Liverpool did really well against Villa, and we don't
yeah,
own any of our players, so that's again also something to keep looking at for future
yep.
game weeks. So yeah, that sums up a bit our own reviews. Let's see now how the models performed in game week 4. What did you make of the data, Sertalp?
hmm Again, as usual, I got this analysis and visualization from Neil Rankins on Twitter.
Yeah,
And as usual, we will cover both outcome accuracy and also expected accuracy. And by
yeah,
outcome accuracy, we are comparing the pre-game week prediction, essentially what models were saying. We are comparing it to how many points the players actually got.
yeah.
And so we had 4 game weeks of data now. And right now, Fantasy Football Hub has the lowest error rate, meaning that it
Okay,
was the most accurate. But again, the
right,
numbers are very close. But Fantasy Football Hub is in the first place, and then we have Mikhail Tokmam's transfer algorithm, and then we have FPL review, and then Fantasy Football Scout. So these four are close to each other in terms of
right.
accuracy, and they are
Yeah,
changing order, as you might have noticed.
yeah,
Um, Fantasy Football Fix, Draft Hound, and FPL team. It is also visible in this chart if you are watching on YouTube, but their error rate are a little bit higher compared to others, the first
yeah,
four. And based on based on underlying data, Mikael Tokvam is at the first place, and then we have Fantasy Football Hub, and then FPL Review, then Fantasy Football Scout. Then we have Draft Hound, Fantasy Football Fix, and FPL Team in terms of underlying data accuracy. And in this case, we are comparing, again, pre-game week prediction with the expected data. And expected here means, I know it's a little bit confusing because sometimes we use expected point to indicate pre-game week prediction. So I
mhm,
try to use prediction when I refer to that one. And then expected is the expected goal, expected assist, expected clean sheet, based on how the team actually performed or the player actually performed. Doesn't necessarily mean that it translated into points. Like players like Jackson, for example, is able to get some expected goals so that you feel like actually your decision was correct because
mhm,
he's getting into positions, he's taking shots from dangerous positions, but doesn't translate into FPL points. As you mentioned, it could be because of you know you are getting unlucky, or it could be a skill issue too. But so we are trying to cover both cases. So in terms of outcome, that was the like order of the models, and based on the underlying data, this is where we are. Again, numbers are very close, and we were talking about it in the last 3 weeks. But there's also another way of looking at this data from a game week perspective. And Neil actually prepared this chart also for us. So, and for people who are listening, so we group players by their position: goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and forwards, and we checked how accurate models are for each position. And most of the time, I mean, if there's an higher error in a particular position, it is similar for all the models. For example, in game week 2, we talked about how the midfielder projections were a little bit off. Because of the Brighton guys. And then in game week 3, defender projections were a little bit off. And you can easily actually see it if you see the data. And for game week 4, it was forwards. And there's a huge error in this case. I mean, it is even higher than both game week 2 and game week 3. And I'm not sure, like, when we haven't checked in detail yet, but if you check the game week 4 data, Fantasy Football Hub's forward error is quite low compared to others. And I need to check, what's going on with the data, but we try to be careful with how we are cleaning this data and how we are representing these numbers.
Sure.
And finally, same analysis for the underlying data. You will notice that for midfielders and defenders, projections were more off than goalkeepers and forwards. And so then it means that models were actually able to predict that, these players, forward players, will get into positions and they will collect XG, but at the end of the day, we didn't get the FPL points. And so from that perspective, they were accurate enough to predict that they will get into good positions and they will collect XG.
Right.
But if you are checking the underlying data, you will quickly realize that midfielder projections they're always problematic. First of all, we have lots of midfielder players, as I have mentioned earlier. And it's a difficult category to predict. Yeah, and goalkeepers, as I mentioned before, is the easiest category. You're just trying to predict the clean sheet, obviously, and also bonus points. So it's relatively easy compared to other positions.
Yeah, or less options to score points, basically.
Yeah. So unless a goalkeeper scores a goal or gets an assist in the following weeks, probably the error rates will stay the same.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that data again. And that actually brings us, I think, to one of the questions we received. It's a question we received from Brun. And he was asking about the ensemble data, as you call it, because I think you're not relying on just one data source when you do your optimization, but you're kind of making a mix of it. So can you explain again how that works?
Yeah, so ideally, mixing these models usually result in a lower error rate. I mean, you can always find the hindsight optimal weights that could have minimized your error, like in general. But it is very difficult because just looking at first 4 game weeks of data, or let's say like first 3 game weeks of data, I could have generated the ideal percentages. We could have minimized the error in first 3 game weeks. But when I use it for the game week 4, I was going to be way off from the ideal weights. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the first, the data you have, the ideal weights will translate into the future ideal weights. It is good to know which models are more accurate and which models are more accurate in certain positions. And Bran also asked about that too, like if I'm considering these models success for a position group. I haven't done it yet, but something we talk very often in the analytics circle is that, for example, for Mikkel Tokvam, his midfield projections are usually very good. But he also mentions in his own Patreon page that he is kind of outsourcing defender projections, so they're not as reliable as midfielders and forwards. Because
Okay.
of that, most people who are, like some people, so when they mix Mikhail Tokmam's data with FPL reviews projections, they
Yeah.
drop goalkeeper and defender projections from Mikhail Tokmam, for example.
Okay.
I
Right.
haven't done it yet,
Yeah.
but the way I do it right now is I actually, out of these 7 models, I try to find which ones are the most relevant ones. So I discard some of them if I feel like the error rate is too high. And
Mm.
among those remaining 3 or 4 models, I try to find the ideal weights based on the historical data,
Okay.
and then I just try to round it up because sometimes the ideal weights are like 37% of model A,
Right.
23% of model B, so I just make it like 30% and 20% maybe. That's how I do it. But when I'm actually optimizing for my own team, I usually, well, since I usually make my decisions the last day,
Right.
I try to use the model that has been updated
Yeah.
the latest, usually
Yeah.
FPL review,
Yeah.
and sometimes I use Mikhail Tokmam's data too.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I have some Scout and Hub in the mix too. But again,
Okay.
I mean, this is something that I constantly keep changing,
Right.
but grouping them or using particular position groups and different weights for every position is a better idea if you have the means to do it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And so the analysis you've been doing this season to look at the model performance, it's something you haven't used yet, you mentioned, but is that then something you plan to use more in future as we have more data and more game weeks?
Yeah, essentially yes. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
current percentages are mostly based on that, but also my little bit of my personal bias too.
Yeah, I get it. And as you said, some data gets updated more often, like FPL review, and then you take the latest data on a Friday, for example.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
especially it's good because one thing that FBI review has that I like, whenever there's a leak, for example, people update that player's minutes on the
Okay.
tool, and then
Right.
you're able to see the impact of it. Suddenly, that
Okay.
player's expected points goes down, and then he's
Yeah.
no longer optimal, for example. So
Yeah.
those kind of stuff I find really fascinating
Yeah. Yeah.
and very useful. But I mean,
Indeed.
realistically speaking, you can kind of do something similar with other data too. I mean, I can solve the problem with, let's say, Mikhail Toklam's data, and if I know that this player um, won't start, so that you can drop the expected minutes by yourself, like you can manually edit it, or you can
Right.
ban the player if that's a
Yeah.
player that you were kind of considering to transfer in. So there
Yeah.
are ways to do it, but it's very convenient
Yeah.
for
Okay.
instance. Yeah.
Great. I think that covers it. Thanks again, Brun, for that question. Let's move to another question. We received one from Nihal, FPL Masala on X, Twitter. He's asking who the most over and underperforming outfielders are. So based on, I think, then the first 4 game weeks of data. So
Yeah.
did you have a chance to look at that, Sertalp?
Do you have a guess before I share it?
Oh, do you have a guess? Oh, I should have prepared for that, I guess.
I'm sorry. Maybe we can do it in following game weeks.
I don't have a guess.
Okay.
No. Surprise me.
Okay. Overperforming outfielders. So here I used Mikhail Tokmam's prediction data, and I compared FPL points to the predictions. And Rodrigo is the player with the most, like, who's overperforming the most,
Yeah.
with almost 12.08 uh,
Okay.
over his expected value.
Yeah.
And in the second rank, we have Mubemo, and then March, Bowen, and Ward Pros. So these are the top 5 players who are overperforming their predictions.
Yeah, no, no. Just to comment on Rodrigo, yeah, indeed. I mean, he scored 2 goals so far, so I think that wasn't included in any of the models. I think that there was some information that he has a bit of a different role with Kovacic now in the team. That he has a bit more freedom and he can play a bit more attacking. So maybe indeed that's something we should keep in mind.
Hmm.
Of course, there are many options at City, so I think Rodrigo is not maybe the one we plan to go for as first option. Even though his price, of course, is also very interesting. Let's check. He's now at 5.7. So yeah, for a City player who so far started all games, that can be quite appealing.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, Mbuemo has been, of course, very consistent. He scored a great goal again in the last game week. It was quite late in the game. I was looking at the scores and I was like, okay, Mbuemo didn't score. That's good for me because I don't own him. And then he scored one. I think he did that before as well. He doesn't mind to score a late goal, so that's good. And then, yeah, March also interesting because everybody talked about Mitoma or João Pedro, and in the end, it was March who scored a few goals. So
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, West Ham. I think we talked about them last
Hmm.
week. Last season they had a bad season, but this season they started really well. I think they did uh, well in terms of investing the money they received for Rice. One of the players they bought is Ward Prowse. I think we knew already that Ward Prowse could be a
Hmm.
consistent point scorer. He was already doing that at Southampton, and of course at West Ham. Yeah, he could be even better, and he is showing that so far. He is showing that so far. So personally, I think that at some point I will probably own Ward Prowse.
Hmm.
I might not be the only one. Uh, that I definitely want to keep an eye on. All right, that's good.
Yeah.
And who are the underperformers then?
Underperformers. So we have McAllister as the
Okay.
uh, top, underperformer.
Yeah.
In second rank, we have Havertz, and
Yeah.
then Enzo,
Okay.
Grealish, and Trossard.
Yeah.
Um, so McAllister's case is a little bit interesting because I think game week one he had a higher expectation. So most of these errors or like underperformance is mostly coming from game week one. That
Yeah.
maybe I'm not sure, but maybe Malol assumed that he might have a penalty duty or something similar. But
Yeah.
anyway, so this is where we are right now. I mean, Havertz is a player that some people owned, so it might be a little
Yeah.
bit upsetting for them. But any comments on these ones?
Yeah, no, McAllister, of course, also had a red card in one of the games. So that was, I think, a -2 for him. So that might also have contributed to
Oh
it.
yeah, that's true.
Havertz interesting because he does get the minutes, but so far, it didn't really return much. So don't know what we should think of it of that. Think maybe if he does keep getting the minutes, then the points might come. But there are other options at Arsenal with Saka, with Ødegaard, also
Hmm.
delivering. Same for Martinelli. There are some talks about Jesus being back. He came into the team as a sub last game week, so maybe he will start again next week. So
Hmm.
that would also be interesting. Enzo Fernandez, yeah, he missed a penalty, so I think also that had a negative impact on the points. Grealish missed the last game, and then Trossard. Trossard is interesting because I think at the beginning of the season, I think some people were thinking about having him, but then in the last game, he didn't even come in as a sub.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I'm not sure what happened there. But of course, a lot of players now in the Arsenal squad, um, and apparently Trossard dropped a little bit in the ranking there. It seems.
Yeah, I think in total he played around 60 minutes this season and only
Yeah,
got 2 points. So
yeah,
yeah, a little bit
no,
disappointing.
yeah. Okay, well, those were some great charts. So thanks, Nehal, for asking the question.
Hmm.
Really, really useful. And then, yeah, let's move to the next question. And this question was actually a question that came in from different people, as because it's international break. People have the wild card on their mind. Typically, it's a good moment to wildcard as it gives you a bit of time to look at the different options. Potentially, you could also benefit from some price rises during these two weeks of the international break. But is this the right time? It's still a little bit early in the season, and if this is not the right time, what is the right time? Is what most people are asking. So, do you have any thoughts or any analysis on this, Sertalp?
So, yeah, lots of people ask this question. So, optimal week to wildcard is a little bit complicated, as you might know. It's both complex and complicated because it depends on your team. First of
Yeah,
all, like where you are with your team and how many changes do you need to
yeah,
get closer to the optimal team.
right,
Sometimes dead ending has some benefits, which is mainly what people wondered, when the fixtures will change enough for me to go from, let's say, like three Chelsea defenders to something else.
right.
Um, Again, it's a difficult question for everyone. Optimal wildcard week is different,
Mm,
and I haven't done any analysis on this question yet, to be honest, because I feel like first wildcard is usually useful. Um, because in the first game weeks, we don't know actually how many minutes players will play, and you,
yeah,
you are not actually sure which positions they will play. So
yeah,
after we get familiar with it, it is
yeah.
actually ideal to use it if you're in a bad shape.
Right,
Otherwise, it is better to keep it for an emergency because suddenly you might lose like two, three players, especially now with the like international break.
yeah,
I used to think that it is better to use the wildcard during international break. I mean, that was some kind of like a heuristic I used, but I don't
mm,
think that's the only thing that matters. I mean, it obviously
no,
has some advantages, but having
right,
two free transfers during the international break is good enough in most cases.
yeah,
And someone from our analytics Discord, it is P. Carroll, did actually an analysis and generated some visualizations that I want to talk about. So this
okay,
analysis is actually independent of what team you have, which I like quite a bit.
yeah,
And the way he designed this experiment, he he's optimizing for 4 game weeks before the wildcard and then 12 more weeks after wildcard. So a 16 game week period.
all right,
And you might be wondering, where we got the data. Actually, FPL Kiwi released a season-long data, so that's the source of this analysis.
all right,
So the good thing about this analysis is when you optimize for 4 game weeks before the wildcard, and then much more game weeks after wildcard, you are actually able to see the the impact of the fixture changes a little bit better.
okay,
And for this analysis, he used all the game weeks from game week 9 to game week 20. So all the possible wildcard game weeks. I mean, obviously, like you can use your wildcard even earlier than this, but this is what the study captured.
okay,
And I know that wildcard 9 is something people talk a lot, but in this study, wildcard 10 comes a little bit better than wildcard 9.
all right,
So game week 10 is better, but even better is game week 17 and 18. And I
mm,
think in a subsequent experiment, he showed that game week 18 wildcard is actually, one of the best.
okay,
So, but game week 18 is too far from now, and people have, you know, they need to do some changes. For
yeah,
close term, game week 10 or 9 is a good game week to wildcard. If you are asking about just a general idea,
yeah,
and if you can hold, there are some better opportunities as I see it from this analysis. But um, I'm planning to run my own experiments
yeah,
just to see how about my own team, but also
right,
I will try to also make a generic analysis. But I think this is amazing. I mean, we are able to see that there are good opportunities far in the future, but if you
mm,
can't wait that long, I mean, we have some good options in game week 9 and 10.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking at it. So week 18, that's December 23. So that's Christmas.
Hmm.
So that's still quite far ahead. But indeed, I mean, if you can wait till that long, if your team is still good, then adapt at that time. It can put you in a good position to attack the second half of the season. So, do you already have for yourself an idea of the wildcard plan, or is that will depend on your analysis?
I am kind of waiting for a disaster to happen so that I will be forced to use it. I don't want to
Yeah,
use it too early and then find myself in
no,
a position that I need to, take a hit. It doesn't happen, that often, but still, like, especially now with the, as we mentioned, with Son, for example, playing in a better position, potentially
hmm
getting higher points,
yeah,
it will impact his projected points significantly.
yeah,
And when it
yeah,
when it happens, if I want to go for him, for example, model will tell me that you need to do these changes so that you can get Son. That's the point. Probably I will use my wild card, for example. I mean, I'm not saying that I will use it early, but I will probably keep it for a point in time where there will be significant changes to projected points that,
right,
it will be useful for me. I don't
yeah,
think that we can, make a plan like even here, like even we know that the game week 18 is the optimal week to wildcard. I mean, that's probably not I will do. I will probably keep my
no,
wild card until then and then, well, see at any point if I will need to use it so that I can get a significant advantage.
indeed,
But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, game week 9 or 10 looks good, but I will try to keep my wild card longer.
yeah,
Every
yeah,
season I say it and then I use it early, but yeah, I will try
yeah,
to keep it this time.
yeah, yeah, and stay flexible,
And
indeed.
how about you? Do you have a
Yeah,
plan?
similar. I will try to hold on to it as long as possible. I think it's really a valuable chip. And I think the thing with wildcard is that you see some people wildcarding now and then being really happy with their scores, and that's of course great. You can use your wildcard to attack the next game weeks, but to your point, you never know what can still happen. In 4 or 5 game weeks time, a lot of things could have changed or can change, and yeah, you might want to use your wildcard then.
Yeah,
So personally, I think it's still a bit early. I wouldn't do it now. The season is long, 38 game weeks. I'll try to keep it at least until game week 10, but maybe even longer if I can. For example, just before December is also what I sometimes like to do because December is a busy month with
yeah,
all the games during
sure.
the festive season. So there's also a good period to look at the fixtures and target with your wild card. But yeah, as always, it's very much team dependent. If your team needs a lot of fixing, then it might be best to use it now. But also at the same time, also as many people also say, you also said it earlier, don't worry too much about your rank at this stage. Of course, it's nice if you are in a good position, but it's still very much early days. The differences are not that big. So if you have a low rank, don't feel forced to use your wild card. I would say you might still need it later.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, cool. We covered that one, and I think, as you said, you will do some more analysis, which you
Hmm.
probably will be sharing on Twitter, or otherwise we can come back on it next week. Then let's move to another question. We received it from Eric Nas Onstad, who was asking about the model's preference for Newcastle defenders. I think we saw that also in the optimal team last week. There were 3 Newcastle defenders in the optimal team. Of course, we will see next week if anything changed. But in general, I think the data is still quite favoring the Newcastle defense, even though so far this season they didn't look too stable. So, yeah, what do you make of that, Sertalp? Should we still put faith in the Newcastle defense?
So yeah, I was checking the probability data from FPL review on this. So even though we kind of think that the Newcastle didn't, have the clean sheets in the past, like, past few months, and so that they didn't look as good. But for game week, well, for future game weeks, their clean sheet probabilities are high actually.
Yeah,
So, for example, for next game week, it is around almost like 40%, and then for game week 6 against Sheffield, it is 41%. Sorry, yeah, 41%, and in game week 7, it is 44%, and in game week 9, they have the highest clean sheet probability with 42%. And so this is just, for future game weeks. But there was this visualization shared by FPL Chase, which shows also the non-penalty XG conceded in Premier League for the rolling 12 games average, and
Yeah.
which is adjusted for the schedule difficulty, which shows that Newcastle is actually one of the best teams in the league. So we have Crystal Palace, and then Manchester City, and then Aston Villa, then Newcastle. So even though
Mm.
Newcastle were missing their, getting clean sheets, they are still in a good position in terms of, how much XG they concede. So which gives me more confidence in having triple Newcastle. It is, in my opinion, if people are scared because of the fact that they didn't have a clean sheet recently, so that they will avoid Newcastle defenders, that's actually good for analytics managers, in my opinion, because I
Yeah.
think they will get clean sheet in this period, probably multiple clean sheets. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I
that's
think.
true. And I think we also shouldn't forget that they had some pretty tough fixtures.
Yeah.
Looking at it now, they started against Villa, then City, Liverpool, and Brighton. So,
Hmm.
those are some of the most attacking teams in the league, I would say. And yeah, they didn't concede too many goals, but in each game they conceded at least one. So yeah, no clean sheets yet. But again, against four pretty strong teams, and I think the next game against Brentford could be a little bit tough again.
Hmm.
It could be, it's maybe a different level than what the teams they played against so far. But also Brentford is a good attacking unit, let's say.
Hmm.
And then they face Sheffield and Burnley. So then it gets a bit more interesting. And I think from those games, we can see how reliable, let's say, the defense will be against lower ranked teams.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think from that perspective, we could still rely on Newcastle for the future game weeks. Personally, I'm just a bit wondering if I should go for Trippier because then, it's 6.5 million. We know that he also has a lot of routes to attacking
Yeah.
points. So that's, of course, why we should go for him. But if we have a bit of doubt on Newcastle now, then it feels maybe a bit wrong, or you don't feel too confident to also invest extra money there.
Yeah.
So that could be another decision point because there's also, of course, Botman, even though he was injured now. Let's see how that develops, and there's also Shower, who's quite
Hmm.
interesting. So
Hmm.
a few options to look at. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, good. We'll come back on this also next week when we look at game week 5 in a bit more detail.
Yes.
For the next question, let's stick a little bit to the defensive area of the teams, but then by looking at the goalkeepers, we have a question from Roberto Hollis, who has Onana, same like me. Welcome to the club. Uh, and of course, so far we didn't have too much joy, even though the first game week was good. So he's wondering now if it's worthwhile to spend a free transfer or maybe even a -4 on Onana, and that made me think, maybe we should look at the top goalkeepers based on the data.
Well, first of all, let me ask you, like, what are you thinking? Do you think you will sell Onana in the close term?
No, I don't think so. Even though it has been a bit frustrating, 0 points from a goalkeeper in 2 consecutive weeks. It's not great, but I think I'll stay patient.
Hmm.
The fixtures do look quite good for United going
Yeah.
forward.
Hmm.
So I'll give it a few more weeks and I'll assess it again. I mean, I was positive about Onana in game week 1, even though he was a bit lucky then. We said it as well against Wolves. He had 9 points. I was quite happy, and I remember that I said that with Onana, you can have clean sheet points, but you can also have a bit more than that, save points. But he's also very much involved in the gameplay. So yeah, uh, in game week 2, 3, and 4, we didn't see that too much in terms of point returns. But for me, it's too early to give up. So I'll stick to it, and that's also because I don't see another much better option so far.
Yeah.
But maybe you will tell me there is someone now.
So to be honest, I checked next 8 game weeks of
Yeah,
fixtures, and I used FPL reviews projections on this to see which
yeah,
goalkeepers comes on top. And
yeah,
so we have Ellison as the best goalkeeper in terms of total projected points, and
yeah,
then we have Pope, as we constantly talk about this, but Newcastle has good defensive fixtures, and then we
yeah,
have Onana. So I don't think there is any goalkeeper you can go from Onana unless you are trying to maybe release some funds, but it doesn't even make sense from that perspective because he's only 5 million.
yeah.
So if I had Onana at this point, I would have kept him because there are much more important transfers that you can do to your
Right.
like defense or midfield or forward. That goalkeeper is hardly a concern in my opinion. And
Yeah,
like even if he doesn't keep um like clean sheets, so as weird as it sounds, it only makes a 4 point difference, right? It's either like 2 or 6. I mean,
right.
like obviously excluding number of goals conceded or like
Yeah,
bonus save points.
yeah,
Um, I don't think there's anyone else you can go from Onana, and he's pretty good with the projections. But yeah, I mean, that's my opinion. I'm actually a little bit surprised. I mean, I understand that based on first few game weeks, people get frustrated and they want to sell. I usually get the same urge about my players. Like if they
yeah,
blanked, I'm like I'm losing my patience already.
yeah,
But then you check the fixtures and you realize that you bought this player for a long term. Like you check the data,
yeah.
like
Indeed.
for maybe 12 game weeks or 16 game
Right,
weeks. That's why you picked them. So it doesn't make
right.
sense to sell him just after like 4 game weeks, is my opinion.
No, no, I agree. And I think maybe one goalkeeper we should also keep an eye on is Vicario from Spurs.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not too many people considered him as he was new also to the league. Let me see, he's owned by 5%. So far, Spurs looked quite good in defense, even though last game week they conceded 2 goals. But before that, they had 2 clean sheets. And also their fixtures look pretty good. So I
Yeah.
don't see him yet in your chart, but
Yeah. He's
maybe,
actually
maybe.
sixth. He's right
Oh, he's
after
sixth.
Martinez,
Okay,
and
all right.
his projections for this game week is actually the highest among all these like 6 goalkeepers. It's 4.22.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah,
Yeah. Well, they
it's
face
it's a good
Sheffield at
call.
home,
Yeah.
so that's probably why. But after
Yeah.
that, they play against Arsenal and Liverpool, so that could be a bit more tricky.
Yeah, it's some challenging
Yeah.
fixtures,
Yeah.
but despite that, I mean, despite the difficult fixtures, he appears in
Yeah.
this is something good.
Okay. Good. Good to know. And so that gives a little bit of hope for us Onana owners. Let's not give up yet. And hopefully he will return the points for us next week. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. It's a bit of different format. We covered some Q&A, which I thought was quite fun to do. Was there anything
Mhm.
else you wanted to cover, Sertalp?
I don't think so. So we will come
Okay.
back next week
Yes.
with a regular episode. But I enjoyed the QA format. We haven't done this in a while.
No. And it's nice to get some questions again. So thanks for the people who submitted their questions. We'll just take a look again at our mini league. So currently we have 234 teams. It went up again. That's nice. And you can still join it via code 0JSDLA. The leader stayed the same. Congrats to Alex Wilmot with his team IU Not Entertained. And he had a really good game week, different than us. He scored 97 points, bringing his total now to 311 points. So that's pretty
That's
amazing.
an amazing game
I,
week result.
yeah, I took a quick look at his team. He owns Son, so that's 20 points, which we didn't have. And he also had Archer, so maybe that was his first
Oh,
sub, or maybe he had him in the team already. But Archer had 12 points, so that's well done, Alex. Then we have a new number two. It's Duncan Gacheru with his team Kane on a Plane. So that's a nice name as well. He had the same game week score of 97 points, and he is on 300 points in total. And the number three is the same as last week, HP Van Doren, with his team Torn Fighters. He had 87 points and is on 299 points in total. So well done, everyone, and good luck also to the rest of you. Let's keep challenging those top three guys. All right, this was FPL Optimized Podcast episode number 56. Thanks for listening. Enjoy all the international games. As you could see, I'm wearing the Dutch shirt, the
Oh,
one
I was
from,
going to ask
yeah,
you. Yeah.
you didn't ask.
Sorry.
It's the
Does
one,
it have a number?
no, no number. It's the one from the 98 World Cup. You might remember it from the amazing
Oh,
Dennis Bergkamp goal in Marseille against Argentina. I think everybody from the Netherlands, from my generation at least, still can dream about that goal. A beautiful goal in the quarterfinals. But then we lost in the semis against
yeah.
Brazil.
Actually, yeah,
So that,
98 was the first World Cup I have watched, and I was
okay.
cheering for Netherlands actually because I
Oh,
liked the
nice.
color
Yeah,
as a kid.
yeah. That was a nice World Cup in France. Yeah, good memories.
If I remember
All right.
correctly, David scored a really nice goal that I still remember.
Oh, that could be. That doesn't ring a bell right away. For me, it's just Burkamp.
Yeah, well.
No, kidding. And yeah, the Netherlands will play against Greece and Ireland. And we haven't done too well so far. So let's hope we will do better this time. But, for whoever you're rooting for your national countries, of course, good luck. Enjoy the international break. And I would say also enjoy a relaxing weekend, as we don't have to look at all the Premier League scores all the time. We'll be back with a regular episode next week, as Sertalp mentioned as well. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you'll get notified when the next episode is released. And you can also follow us on X. For Sertalp, it's at Sertalp Bilal, and for me, it's at Belfi BB. And as of this season, you can also find us on YouTube. Sertalp, over to you.
Until next time, stay curious and stay analytical. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.